as we continue to realize an increasing food import bill. He emphasizes that CMOS remains a valuable product to St. Lucia that can help improve food and nutrition security.
It's another initiative looking at ensuring that St. Lucians consume more of what is produced locally. Our mantra is to eat fresh, St. Lucia's best. That's our tagline in the ministry. And so this year, the Department of Fisheries has focused on the production of CMOS. So there are some major areas that are growing CMOS in St. Lucia. We have the Praslin, which for many, many years, and Savans Bay. And we also have little pockets like Labrie and Soufriere. But the Praslin and Savans Bay are the main areas. So we have identified farmers and producers around the island, invited them in that CMOS Fiesta to be held, at Fondor Park in Dennery on the 16th, to ensure that we see many derivatives, that can be derived from CMOS production.
The event will feature approximately 20 CMOS processors, farmers and schools displaying products such as CMOS drinks, gels, ice creams, supplements, powders and spa products, as well as the launch of the Ministry of Agriculture's very own CMOS catalogue. According to Mr. Sidney, the event promises to be a fun family day with activities for both adults and children.
As you know, Fondor is known for its jazz activities over the years, and people are still looking forward. When you mention Fondor, people look forward to jazz. So we had to complement the activity, with entertainment. So since we're in Creole Month, we decided to have a number of activities to showcase entertainment.
Beyond the Headlines is sponsored by Flow.
Good morning and thanks for staying with us. 12 and a half minutes now after 7 o'clock. We are now into our Beyond the Headlines segment where we provide a review and analysis of the big stories and discourse on matters of national interest. We are focusing on food security and sustainability on the heels of World Food Day, and today we zoom in on the challenges of self-sufficiency, our ability to feed ourselves on the heels of our World Food Day celebrated on October 17th. Joining me now live via the Flow video line, the acting Deputy Director of Agricultural Services, Mr. Kemuel Baptiste, has been an officer with the Ministry of Agriculture for a number of years. Kemuel has been contributing to the development of the agricultural sector for more than 30 years. Starting off as an agricultural officer in the Soufriere Choiseul district, he gained much indigenous grassroots knowledge. His dedication to personal growth and development motivated him through several years of academic pursuits, culminating with a Master's of Science degree in managing rural change. He has has been a coordinator for several projects focused on greenhouse expansion, food security and adaptation to climate change. He has also served as focal point for agriculture on a National Climate Change Committee, director on the board of directors of the St. Lucia SLMB, and a director of at the board on the DCA as well. He has functioned in the post of Chief Extension Officer, Deputy Director of Agricultural Services, acting, and Director of Agricultural Services, acting as well. He currently holds the portfolio of Deputy Director of Agricultural Services. Kemuel, long portfolio there. I'm so glad to have you. I know that you're very much passionate about agriculture and livelihoods, climate change, and a lot. So, good morning. Thanks for waking up early and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You're most welcome. Interesting discussion on the heels of World Food Day 2023. Talk to us firstly. Let's start off with the framework and the policy. What's the policy like, and what are the strategies which fit into that policy to ensure that we can begin to sustain ourselves and to have sustainable food?
The issue of sustainable food, it's a crazy web of interlinked ideas, thoughts, and actions. If you were to visit the Ministry of Agriculture, there would be a lot of conversation and perhaps documentation about this, the food security, and that is also backed up internationally by agencies like the Food and Agriculture Organization, commonly known as FAO, and other agencies such as AICA and CARDI and everyone. There's a lot of lip service to food security. The truth of the matter is there is a definition for it, and essentially the definition is focused on sufficient quantities of food. It's focused on the availability and access to food. When it comes to the policy environment, the documentation will show that the successive governments have made contributions or have taken food security as a very critical aspect of our nation's development. The challenge for us is many. There are so many challenges when it comes to food security, and hopefully today we could talk about some of those and perhaps look at what are some of the potential solutions. But in terms of policy, it is a policy of government of St. Lucia to ensure that there is sufficient food available at affordable prices that are essentially safe for human consumption, and that persons can have access to sufficient nutritious food for the daily caloric intake. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks for that. Can you point to any tangible evidence or strides that have been made over the years in that regard?
So, when you look at our food production systems, I might be useful to step back just a bit to look at what it is that constitutes this food security. What is it that we're eating? In order for us to be able to be food secure, we have to look at the cultural and social habits of our people. And before we look at the tangible investments that we have made, it might be useful to make note that our eating habits do not line up with our production habits. So we produce a lot of staples and roots and fruits and vegetables, but our consumption patterns are looks at highly processed foods. Notwithstanding, the government of St. Lucia would have made investments in areas of developing our agriculture in terms of livestock. So over the years, we've invested in livestock, majorly poultry, swine, and small ruminants. In 2016, 2017, thereabout, a report by the Performance Management Delivery Unit, PMDU, indicated that if back then we increased the production or our production of livestock by about 60%, that would have represented almost 100% substitution of our meats and meat products. So in that vein, projects such as the Youth Agri-Entrepreneurial Project would have established poultry pens, swine pens, small ruminant pens, that sheep and goat. Part of the story here is to ensure that young persons could get involved in the production of meats. We have not done really well in terms of processing of meat products. We have some private investors, such as Brew Industries, but most of the raw materials actually come out of foreign sources for that particular investment. Other investments that we have made would be in protected agriculture, the greenhouses that we see around. Part of the story here is during the rainy season to ensure that there is consistency of supply of certain vegetables that are critical both to our local consumption as well as our tourism product. Further investments would include investments in the markets. Right now we have large influence of the private sector through massive stores, CPJ and others, and even the hotels who are making direct purchases from producers. But we still have alive and well the St. Lucia Marketing Board that also provides support, and it is still being supported by the public purse to some extent. And so these investments represent the commitment of governments in terms of ensuring that farmers are supported. Along with this, we have technical support services through extension advisory services, engineering services, plant protection services. All these are geared towards ensuring that farmers are able to get the sort of technical assistance that they need to maintain productivity and production efficiency.
Thanks so much, Kemuel, for noting some of those strategic investments that have been made over a period. When you look at what's happening on the ground, though, and it's interesting that you're saying that our production patterns do not really match up with our consumption habits as a population. Yeah. I want to focus how can we begin to make that shift. I know, and as you pointed, there've been efforts towards value added and investments in that regard. But what are some of the challenges and the drawbacks that you are noting which are limiting and restricting us from going the extra mile and doing more, producing more of what we consume?
So there are a couple issues based on that earlier statement that we need to be looking at. I am a strong proponent of food security being looked at from the point of view of a small island developing state. That our food security efforts should be looked at from a regional viewpoint. And by that I mean at the CARICOM level. Here's the deal, Lebon. A lot of what is on the plate at breakfast, lunch, and dinner we do not produce. So for example, the sugars we do not produce. The flour and all the associated flour products we do not produce. The rice we do not produce. These represent some of the major staples. But we do have regional sister countries or partner countries. You've got Belize, you have Guyana, you have Jamaica and Suriname. These countries actually produce grain, they produce the rice and so on. And so for me, I'm a strong proponent of looking at food security from that perspective, because this is what generally we've acclimatized our taste palates to in terms of what we eat on a daily basis. Notwithstanding, what we could do now is to look at what it is that we have comparative advantage in producing. So our small producers have the ability to produce, albeit on a reduced level, certain basic things like, some of our vegetables, some of the pulses. The pulses would include beans and the greens, which of course is important for our diet as a small island developing state that's afflicted by non-communicable diseases like diabetes, hypertension, and so on. So these foods, these non-luxury foods, but they're the veggies, they're the greens that would help to treat with those. Our focus should be on getting those items produced locally. And the other things that we could do locally, produce it, perhaps get into trade of these, and then use the resources from trading those to access the ones that we cannot produce locally. Yeah.
Excellent points. So you may be talking about smart and strategic investments in. We can't produce everything, so we produce some specialized crops, and as you say, utilize revenue from that to purchase what it is that we cannot produce here. And it's interesting that you draw in reference to a regional approach. It's something that we've heard for a number of decades, using the Guyana model, where there are lesser impacts to storm activity annually, but we haven't seen much traction move there. But it's insightful that you still see it as a viable option for us to address our food security concerns.
Shannon,
go ahead.
You probably would have been familiar with the Jack Dio initiative.
Absolutely.
Where that president invited, Caribbean citizens to come on over to Guyana. They were making available large tracts of land. There are some countries who have taken that challenge up, Barbados being one of those. I think it's still one of those things that we should be pursuing, because at the CARICOM level, you would have heard about 25 by 25, meaning that we're looking to reduce our imports of certain agricultural products and food products by 25%. And we perhaps have been limited in our ability to make it happen, but the opportunity presents itself to take advantage of initiatives such as the Jack Dio initiative. But also, one of the questions you asked earlier was about the policies, and the regional policies also has severe impacts. We still have this protectionist attitude towards food production in the region. So, very often you go to the quoted meetings, the Council of the Council for Economic Trade and Development,
Yeah.
which is a regional council, and there's still a lot of protectionism taking place. And so we need to be able to deal with those issues and sort of recognize that if we are talking a regional conversation, that we should behave regionally and allow the shift of goods and not just services, but also food and food products throughout the region. One will understand the need for protection because you want to protect your small producers from the larger producers in the larger states. You want to ensure that they have a surviving chance. But a bit of legislation, a bit of regulation should be able to take care of that as we move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. You are spot on. I appreciate that if you can coin it so well, and if you can appreciate it so well, we wonder what's the challenges at the quoted level. But that's beyond your pay grade and mine. So we leave it there for now. Kemuel, we operate in an environment now where the storms are more frequent and they're more intense. Talk to us about the approach towards adopting climate smart agricultural techniques in moving forward. How important is it that we start to farm with smart techniques, smart climate friendly techniques to ensure that we're really sustainable?
Once upon a time, well, you get the general language when it comes to climate change is adaptation and building resilience. But I heard someone say it was laughable at the time, but it's really not laughable. For small island developing states like ours, it's really about climate survival. Look at some of the major catastrophes we've had in the last few years. You look at the 2013 drought, the Thomas, the Debbie, and so on. The impacts of these events are catastrophic. I mean, it almost wipes out the food production system. And so the issue here really is climate change survival. And some of the steps that we have taken, of course, probably familiar with this livelihoods protection program. I think ECFH is the one that is currently promoting and advocating and administering it, where farmers are able to purchase risk coverage. I think in 2013, the administration then did purchase some packages, and we were able to get some $4 or $6 million. I can't remember the figure now. During that particular disaster, where we purchased some risk against rain and flood and so on. So that is one avenue to deal with the issue of these catastrophic events where you have wind, you have rain, and so on. The thing is, the insurance providers, they have so much to navigate with, because wind is one, flood is another, heavy downpours, that's something totally different. Drought is something else that we also have to be looking at. So if we take those in order, in terms of the droughts, we have been strong advocates of providing storage facilities, rainwater harvesting. The interesting downside of rainwater harvesting is that you harvest water when it's raining, but the rate at which the soil and plants consume and even livestock consume water is generally not really sustainable during the drier periods, because the water is being consumed. So for example, at the rate, if you're doing vegetables, of about maybe 10,000 gallons per acre, depending on what you go in per day. So you could imagine what is required in terms of storage. So that generally has not worked. The way I see it is, if farmers are able to utilize, store water and utilize it during the rainy season or in between, and reduce the cost of water consumption when the dry period comes, they could perhaps tap into raw water or the water system, the commercial water systems, and overall there'll be an overall annual reduction of the cost of production where water is concerned. So this is one of the ways to deal with drought. Ensure that we do harvesting of rainwater, building strategic community dams, and so on. Lebon, what would interest you is that we have established on island, and those have been established for more than 15, 20 years, ponds that were financed by foreign governments. We have the Roseau Pond and we have the Daedlow Pond and associated irrigation systems, and these have never been optimally utilized. And so for another conversation, perhaps we still need to go back and look at, what was the rationale behind those projects? Were proper cost-benefit analysis made for these projects? And why is it that we invested millions of dollars? We're talking 5 million in one case and pretty close to 10 million in the Roseau case. And it is not being optimized in terms of, seeing the outputs at the farm level. So that's that for drought. When it comes to the issue of wind, we are at the mercies of the elements. You would have seen a greenhouse structure down at the St. Louis Community College farm that was supported through IECA, Inter-American Institute for Cooperation in Agriculture, who helped us to get access to this through the government of Mexico. The design of the facility was intended to withstand significant wind speeds, and you would notice that it has stood up really well. Our regular tunnel type greenhouses, which is this one just in this tunnel shape, they don't do really well in winds. They do the job of keeping the rains off, but they don't do really well in winds. So we basically at the mercies of the elements. So what we have done in the past, set up what is called windbreaks at the field level for bananas and other crops, where you set up this line of trees to sort of break the wind speed and so on. And the other area is the rain, the flooding. We put in drainage and so on, but the drainage in storm conditions could only go so far in terms of diverting storm water. And so we still have problems and issues in storm and hurricane situations with the flooding. One of the reasons why you do see those greenhouses is particularly the months of September, October, up to about January, when we have these heavy downpours. These structures are intended to keep the rains off of the plots. So essentially, it's an umbrella. That's why most of them are not enclosed or anything. They're just intended as umbrellas. So this is designed to try to adapt to heavy rains and heavy downpours. So when you look at the whole issue of climate change, these are some of the investments that have been made over the years. We still have to deal with issues of developments in watersheds. So you have the Bexon watershed now that has created a total catastrophe, and also the area that has created
Kemuel will rejoin us shortly. It's a live discussion here on Kemuel. You back with us?
Yes, a call is coming through. So yes, so we have issues of developments in the watershed, and what they're essentially doing is create flash flooding. So these residences, you have downpours. There's no siltation trap or ponds to trap the water and so on. So you still end up in the lower areas with floodplains. And when you look at a number of our watersheds, you have the Fosse-Jacques watershed, you have the Mabia Valley watershed. A lot of these, you have housing developments emerging, and it's causing its own distresses for agriculture and food security as well. It's a mouthful.
It's a separate discussion on its own to look at just what's happening in and around the watersheds, Kemuel, which is so critical. There's a lot of activity happening, some of which unplanned, some of which are illegal, but we must begin to galvanize what's happening there if we're really serious about food security and protecting the limited water resource. There's so much that we want to discuss, Kemuel. I'm flagging now that we're going to have to bring you back because we obviously don't have enough time this morning. I want to go in depth and look at some of the investments that have been made. We've received so much money from friendly governments, and you pointed to examples who have put in millions of dollars and given us millions of dollars from their taxpayers themselves, and we haven't fully utilized those investments. So that's for another show, like our good friend Rick Wayne would say. But to end this morning, Kemuel, probably you could just speak to what are we doing now to make agriculture more sexy and appealing to the younger generation, and the role that they can play. This whole discussion of food security and what the ordinary man with a little spot of land in their backyard can do as well to help out the situation.
So I'm happy that you mentioned it, and I thought that it might have popped up somewhere along the road, the ideology of making agriculture sexy. The truth of the matter is, agriculture is about interacting with the elements. It's about interacting with soil, interacting with water, sunlight, air, and so on. How you make that sexy, I'm not really sure about that part of it. Primary agriculture just requires brute commitment. It requires going through the production process and recognizing that there will be failures, there will be successes. The failures come from a host of causes. It could be, management failures. It could be pestilence. It could be soil environment. A series of those. The truth is, what persons who get into the agriculture sector, particularly primary agriculture, I'm talking here now, need to recognize that it's about interacting with the elements. And at some point, there will be the dirt on your hands. At some point, there will be the tree sap and the stains and so on. This is about not having a passion for it. And primary production is not for everyone. Agriculture, of course, is food security rather is an agri-food system. So you have those persons who are involved in the primary production, and they should stay focused on that. Get into the soil, get into the tractors, or the tillage implementation, get into the fertilizers, the composting, seedlings, and what have you, and produce. Then you have those persons who are the intermediaries. Some are processors, some are traders, and so on. Their business essentially is procurement of that which has been produced, storage, and distribute over time. This is what Massy Stores does in a little way. They do not store for very long, neither does Marketing Board. So these players essentially are the middlemen who sort of store and provide a sort of distribution. You also have the market vendors and the hucksters who in their own way help in the distribution process. So each one of these points, you have those input suppliers, you have the producers, you have the intermediaries, each one of those, and of course the agro-processors who will produce the meats and the meat products and the other condiments and so on. Each one of those persons have their own roles, and the person coming into the agri-food system needs to determine where it is that they want to operate. Because if you want to operate at the primary level and for that to be sexy, the sexiest thing about the primary level is how much money can I make off of this producing safe food that is safe for consumption. And so for me, if once a person has their heart set on this, as I always say, to every man his own. There are some people, mechanics and oils and engines and nuts and bolts, that's their thing. For some people, it's about, philosophical thing. For the farmer, it has to be about getting in there, interacting with the elements, and producing a high quality, safe product that can be used either for fresh consumption, for processing as the need may arise, or for storage for distribution later. Each one of these things need to be done effectively, efficiently, and cost effectively. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for your time this morning. I want to thank you for opening up the discussion. Very much insightful, very informative. We will continue again very soon.
Thank you for having me, Lamont. I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation. There's a lot more that needs to be said, and I'm hoping that we have an audience who will be listening in and taking note of some of the actions that they could contribute to in terms of overall food security, including the backyard gardeners and everybody else that we didn't even speak much about today.
The next time, for sure, we will have them. We will address them, Kemuel. So much has been shared, and I thank you so much for the insight.
Thank you so much for having me.
Blessed. You're welcome. Kemuel Baptiste is the Director of Agricultural Services, the Deputy Director of Agricultural Services, acting in the Ministry of Agriculture. I'm anticipating a confirmation letter will come soon, sir.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Have a good one. 23 and a half minutes now before 8 o'clock. My next guest is already standing by. Next, I'm going to make some moves with the head of the Chess Federation here, and then later we'll continue the discussion on food security and how we can sustain our food consumption patterns here on the island. We take a special pause at this moment to say good morning to you and yours, wherever it is you're listening. We really appreciate your viewership. Thank you for making this your program, and thank you for waking up with us on morning. T. Nigel Tusa, former magistrate, good morning to you. We're getting set to introduce something big here on the platform. I'll make a special announcement before I end at 9, but good morning to Miss Tusa and her family who tuned in. Special love and warmth to you on this Tuesday morning. So this has been Beyond the Headlines this hour, brought to you with the kind compliments of St. Lucia's #1.
Beyond the Headlines is sponsored by Flow.
Why pay full price for your mobile when you can pay half? Just bundle your home internet and mobile services with Flow and save 50% on your mobile bill. That's money in your pockets every month. Plus now you get free YouTube and WhatsApp data. And you can share your plan with up to 3 other numbers. Upgrade now and get a free smartphone. Switch and keep your number. Learn more at discover.co.
Get your clothes sparkling clean